Join me as we talk about the care and propagation of dragon fruit cactus as I plant up this dragon fruit that was left on the side of the road by my neighbor. I was out for a run and I spotted something my neighbor had left out. Let me show you. Dragon fruit. A couple weeks ago, I was out jogging in my neighborhood, and a neighbor who has a very large dragon fruit cactus growing in their yard had obviously done a lot of pruning and left a ton of branches from their dragon fruit. So anyone who has grown a dragon fruit will know that these plants can get very large and they really do need to be pruned back. But this is a plant that I don't actually have in my collection yet, and I've been wanting to grow it. I do have some epiphyllum cactus, otherwise known as orchid cactus or night blooming cactus, but those are a little bit different. One way you can tell the difference is these are kind of like three-sided as opposed to an epiphyllum cactus. These are two-sided, as you can see. This one recently bloomed. I did do a video where I propagated this actual epiphyllum cactus, also found on the side of the road by a different neighbor. Very similar cactus, very similar care. These ones don't grow the fruit, they just have the beautiful flowers. So dragon fruit, also known as pitaya, there's several different varieties. I'm not sure what variety this is. As mentioned, I found it on the side of the road, so it'll be a mystery. We shall see. And we'll see if it even manages to bear fruit. It probably won't bear fruit for quite a long time, but the first thing we want to do is to get this in the soil and get it rooted. So I'm going to show you how to do that. But these plants are supposed to be fairly easy care. They are native to Mexico, Central and South America. They're known for their beautiful orchid-like flowers and their very delicious dragon fruit, which are basically cactus fruit. Instead of being a more desert cactus, they are a tropical cactus, so that should tell you a little bit about their care. They do grow in soil, but they are epiphytic, so that means they have roots that kind of grow out of the sides of the plant to hold on to other plants, such as trees, to climb. And that is something we'll talk about later in the video about where you're going to want to plant these and how you're going to care for them. They do require a very strong frame, and unless you want them to take over a tree, don't plant them near a tree. So first, before I go into too much about the care, I am going to plant these and show you how easy it is to propagate them. As mentioned, my neighbor did leave out a ton of pieces. I grabbed not even half of them. If you have lived in California or Florida, places like that where plants really thrive, you'll know that people leave out huge cuttings because plants thrive here and they get so big, and rather than putting in the compost, we might as well share them. So I have a lot of pieces here, so I'm going to use a fairly large pot. So when you're propagating dragon fruit, I do recommend that you propagate it in a pot. You could propagate directly to soil, but I think a pot is a great way to get it started to ensure consistency of conditions, and they are heavy feeders apparently, so you do want to be able to monitor the fertilizer that you're going to give it and the drainage, etc. Once they get established and grow roots, you can put them directly into the soil. So I've got this pot, I've had it around my house for a while. It's looking a little worse for wear, but for now, it's perfect for getting these plants established. It looks like terracotta. It's not actually terracotta. It is a plastic pot, so it should maintain moisture. Terracotta is also a great choice for this kind of plant because it wicks away moisture and they won't get overly watered. All plants can get root rot if they're left in soil that has too much water, too much standing water. So especially a plant like this is more of like a succulent cactus type plant. You're going to want to make sure your pot has drainage If it's a plastic pot, don't water it as much as you would a terracotta pot. And I'm going to choose an organic cactus succulent based mix. This is what I have to hand, palm cactus citrus. So this is a type of soil that allows for really good drainage. It usually has a lot of sand and vermiculite or lava rock added to it. It's a really nice, well-draining soil, perfect for cactus and succulents and dragon fruit cactus. I always prefer an organic soil. It's much better for the planet. It's better for your plants, especially a plant that potentially could bear fruit later on. I want to make sure that I've got organic soil and I don't have non-organic chemicals added to the soil. So hopefully I have enough soil in this bag because we have a big pot and we have a lot of dragon fruit. I'm just going to add what I have to this. And while we're talking soil, so if you take a good look at this soil, you'll notice there is organic material. There is sort of mulch and ground up bark in there, but there's also sand and pumice and or lava rock that also helps with the drainage. It's perfect for, like, it takes on the moisture, but it whisks the moisture away from the roots. It's really gonna help prevent root rot for your plants, so it's perfect. This particular soil also has some added organic chicken manure, which helps fertilize the plants in a healthy way. So it looks like I do have enough soil, and I'm just going to kind of break it up a bit. Some of it's gonna settle down. Make sure any lumps are out of there and that it's nice and fluffy. It's gonna really be nice and well draining, perfect for our dragon fruit. Now that is looking really good. So once you have your soil ready to go, we're gonna take a look at these pieces of dragon fruit. And I found it actually a couple of weeks ago. So I know that the cuts are nice and calloused over. That means it's really dried out. There's not any place that moisture could get in and cause rot. If you have just taken these cuttings from somewhere else and they still had any moisture on them, you're gonna wanna let them sit out and dry. You know, you could do it for a couple weeks. With cactus and succulents, it's better to be safe than sorry. If moisture gets into a cut, the whole thing will just turn to mush and it will be gone. So it's important to check all your pieces to make sure everything looks pretty good and dry. All these pieces look good. Another thing to note is sometimes it's kind of hard to tell which side is the top and which side is the bottom. I don't know if you can see here, there's very much a stem here, whereas this side is rounded. Unlike other plants, there's not a lot of difference in the way the plant is pointed. However, you may notice there are little dents here with the thorn. The thorns are kind of pointing up. So that's also another way you can tell which side is up and which side is down, because you can imagine if you plant this upside down, it's not going to root. And you do have to be careful. They do have thorns, so be a little bit careful when handling all of these pieces. This one, as you can see, it did get a little damaged at the top. I might set that one aside and just plant the best pieces. I'm not sure we'll be able to fit everything I got. We might have to do two separate pots, but for now, I'm just gonna choose the best pieces here, and everything looks pretty dry, pretty ready to get started rooting. Again, there's some little bit of damage that you just got to be careful. You don't want to get too much water on those cuts. That they are dry, but they are not fully healed, I would say. And I'm actually getting spiked a little bit. So some of the pieces that aren't quite looking as good, I'm gonna set them aside for, maybe we'll do another ugly pot. So I've picked out my pieces. I've checked that the calluses are looking good. They're a little bit dirty, but I might kind of rub them down later. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to this original branch that we started with. And this cactus is actually quite heavy. There's a lot of heft to it. So I'm gonna wanna plant it deep enough that it will stay upright. I may need to stake this to keep it upright, but I don't wanna plant it too deep because again, it might rot. So we do wanna prevent rot. So I'm gonna plant it probably about 2 to 4 inches deep. We'll see how many actually fit in this pot. We might not plant all of them. I think I probably only really have room for 1, maybe 2 more. I guess maybe we're good. So one thing that I would love to show you is this is a perfect example. So I mentioned that these plants are epiphytes. So you see this little root that's coming straight out of here. So this is sort of a little aerial root, and yes, it'll be great when I plant this. This will probably help this plant root properly. However, this root is actually a climbing root. So these plants, when they are in their natural environment, they climb up trees, they grow on the side of trees, and they use the trees to help grow upwards and grow taller. And these aerial roots can take on moisture from, rain, dew, etc. in the jungles, in the rainforests where these are commonly found. That's one thing to bear in mind when you're planting these. If you plant these near an electrical pole, they will grow up that electrical pole and take over, and they can be really quite dangerous. Same goes for if you have any trees, they will take over the tree. So they can be a little bit invasive in that sense. So another reason why it could be safe and better to plant them in a pot rather than the ground, or if you are planting it in the ground, just be sure you leave it at least a good 15 feet away from a tree or an electrical pole. Better safe than sorry. There is a really beautiful dragon fruit growing at our local zoo. It's growing up a palm tree and it has completely taken over. It's a wonderful sight to see, but if you didn't want it growing there, it could be problematic. So here's our last one going in the pot. And so far, everything is standing up happily on its own. So here are all my cactuses. I ended up putting 6 in this pot. Are 6 gonna stay in this pot? Probably not. I think they will get too big, but we're just going to propagate these and see how they go. So now that my dragon fruit have been planted up, I'm gonna wanna make sure and keep these in the shade for now. Now, I know what you're saying. These are bright tropical plants. Why would I put them in the shade? Well, the thing is, when you first begin to propagate stuff, you want to keep it a little bit sheltered. You want to keep it protected. So I'm going to keep these in the bright indirect light. I don't want hot heat light to go on these plants. They will cook. They're much more likely to start rooting if they're in bright indirect light. So I'm going to leave them outside. It's California, it's pretty bright, so even if I have stuff in the shade, they're still getting a decent amount of light. And the truth is, these plants are never going to want to be in the hot, direct sunlight. They're always going to want a little bit of protection. So whether that's underneath a tree, in partial light, like for example, back there you see we're getting kind of evening light, that kind of direct sunlight, not the hot noon, all day, 6-hour-long heat that normal desert cactuses can take. These are a little bit more sensitive to that kind of thing. Water. So again, I always think of plants, where do they come from? Since these plants come from a much more tropical climate, they're going to want a little bit more water. Now they are very drought tolerant. They hold a lot of water in their flesh, which makes them succulents, but they do require a lot more water than, say, your average cactus. That said, you again want to make sure you have really well draining water. They don't want to be sitting in standing water. Like most plants, you're best off making sure you water it as soon as the soil feels completely dry. So I know people are always wanting me to give a time, like how often do you do it? So I would probably water these maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks. While they're propagating, I'm gonna water very sparingly. They don't have roots yet. So I'm gonna maybe add a little bit of moisture to the soil tomorrow. I'm not gonna do anything today because I don't want this flesh to rot. It can be very susceptible to rot, like most succulents. So I've planted my dragon fruit. I'm gonna give it a little bit of a spray down because it was a little bit dirty. And I'm actually on the mist setting because I don't want to overwater this right now. It really doesn't need much water. Just a small bit of moisture to send a signal to this plant to say, hey, you can start rooting. So once they've established some roots, I'm gonna water more often, weekly, maybe every 2 weeks, especially if it's been very warm or the soil feels excessively dry. That's when I'm gonna make sure and water them. So I'm gonna keep them in shelter. I'm gonna keep them relatively watered. And the other thing with these plants is apparently they are very heavy feeders. So I'm gonna wanna fertilize at least once a month, maybe twice a month. Now it just wants a kind of average fertilizer, like a 20-20-20. That means equal parts NPK. Most fertilizers will have those numbers on the front of them. I'm gonna give them an organic fertilizer, and that should really keep them happy. Now, once they've rooted, once they've established themselves, these plants can grow very large. Hence, my neighbor cutting back their own plants. They can also get very, very heavy. So more than likely, I'm going to have to put them either in a larger pot or I'm gonna have to build a frame for them to grow on top of. It's really interesting looking at dragon fruit farms, how the frames fit around them. They're usually like made out of a bunch of 2x4s, something that is strong enough to take the weight of these plants, that they'll grow up and then they'll start to weigh down, and that's when the flowers and the fruit usually come out. My cats decided to join. I have a part of my yard that has a lot of fruit trees. I think this would be perfect to put over there. Behind it is a cement wall, so I might do a frame on the cement wall so they can kind of use the cement wall as their frame to hold on to. Again, since I found these on the road and I didn't buy them from a nursery, I have no idea what variety they are. So apparently some dragon fruit do require other plants to pollinate the flowers in order to make the fruit, and they aren't self-pollinating. I'm not really sure. That will be for a different video. This video is more about propagating and growing your pitaya, and then once these get bigger and get to flower, we can cross that bridge when we get there. I'm sure there's plenty of videos on YouTube all about the dragon fruit. So overall, this pitaya or dragon fruit is meant to be fairly easy care. It's very easy to propagate. I should be seeing roots in probably about 2 to 4 weeks. Eventually it will start growing new branches. One of them already has a little new branch. Oh, a few of them have new little branches coming out. That's nothing to do with me. That was the plant already doing that before it got cut back. The care is pretty easy. Just be careful about not too much scorching heat, but it does want bright indirect light. It wants to be watered fairly regularly and fed fairly regularly, but not overly watered, and be careful to avoid root rot. Once your pitaya starts growing, just be careful about giving it something to grow on or keeping it away from things you don't want it to grow on.
3 weeks later.
So it has been about a month since I planted these in here. You can see they've got some little growths going on. I think those were already there before I started planting them, but they're obviously growing. But I want to see how they rooted. So very gently. It feels pretty solidly in there, but let's just see how this looks. Yep, I felt roots. Sure enough, if you have a look at that, there are roots. So it's, as you can see, I only planted it, you know, 2.5 inches deep, and the roots are coming out of that very bottom. And I'm going to put this back in because this has been a successful propagation. I should note as well, so I went on vacation and I was gone for almost 3 weeks, and so that's how long I left these without being watered. I watered them before I left. I watered them again this morning when I got home. But yeah, they're doing just great. They're here in the shade underneath my house. I'm not gonna leave them here. I don't want them to grow onto my house. But so far, this has been a very successful propagation of dragon fruit cactus. So that is it. I hope this video has been helpful for growing and propagating your own dragon fruit cactus. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them down in the comments. I try and reply to every comment that I get. You can also find me on Instagram and TikTok. Don't forget to subscribe.